Hi everyone, and welcome to this presentation on plagiarism. We're going to go over definitions, some examples, and also tips on how to avoid it. This is the same presentation that I gave during orientation. So the first question that students always ask when we do this presentation is, do we really need this? And the short answer is yes. The long answer is that there are specific statistics and studies that suggest that plagiarism and cheating is a big problem from high school to college to even grad school. And some suggest that it is increasing due to the widespread use of the internet and other digital media. Fact of the matter is that it does happen at our school, and it can be in the form of papers all the way to theses that have been plagiarized. So my intent here is not to scare anybody. My goal is to arm you with certain tools so that you don't go down the slippery slope of plagiarism, so that you have the ability to recognize what is and isn't plagiarism, and how you can paraphrase in a way and cite your sources in a way that is not plagiarizing. So let's go over the definition, just the sort of dictionary definition. When we plagiarize, the idea here is that you're actually stealing. You're stealing somebody's ideas, and in some cases, their actual words. And stealing, whether you intend to or not, is unethical. And so let's talk about this question of intent or even ignorance. You can, well, after this presentation, you won't be able to plead either of these, but even so, these are really just excuses. With the internet, especially Google, there's really no way to not know that you're plagiarizing something. But just on the off chance that some things may be unclear, that's my purpose here today. So in terms of our own school policy, this is direct from the website. Plagiarism at Cal State LA is defined as the act of using ideas, words, or work of another person or persons as if they were one's own, without giving proper credit to the original sources. The following are some examples of plagiarism that are intended to be representative but not all inclusive. Of course, failing to give credit via proper citations, failing to use quotation marks when quoting directly from another. And we're going to talk a little bit about the use of quotation marks and when they need to be used. Paraphrasing the expression of thought by others without appropriate quotation marks or attribution. This is another example that I'll be going over in terms of what not to do. Assembling parts from various works and submitting the synthesis or single paper as one's own creation. So I'm not going to go over this in detail, but it's just basically taking different paragraphs or sets of paragraphs from different sources and then kind of hodgepodging and putting them all together into a paper that you claim is your own. I'm not going to go over this one too much, except to say that the thesis would have been, the plagiarized thesis would have been an example of this, where someone else's thesis was used, passed off as the student who was plagiarizing. But in any case, plagiarizing on any academic assignment, including coursework, exams, theses, in whole or in part, is subject to discipline for academic dishonesty. So let's go over some examples now. I'm going to go over the top 4, maybe 5, I don't remember, types of plagiarism that are most common when it comes to student work. The first one involves copying without quoting and citing. So this is where you copy a person's words verbatim, which means word for word, with no authors or the year identified, no quotation marks, and no page numbers. So these are the 3 items that you need when you are copying someone's words verbatim. So here is a paragraph from an article that we're going to use as our example. I'm not going to read it. You can read it. You can pause the video and read it on your own. But it's basically all about culture and what it is. And here's the source, Corbin in 2002, and the title and journal page numbers. Okay, so we're going to use this to go over some examples of plagiarism and not plagiarism. Okay, so here's our first example. Cultural competency in social work is necessary given the diverse population served by practitioners. These first 2 sentences are my sentences. The sentence in question is the one in blue. In fact, culture is not monolithic or static, but variable and dynamic. So in this case, do you think it would be plagiarism if this was the paragraph that I submitted as my work? And the answer is yes, it's plagiarism. Why? Well, there are no author and year provided, no quotation marks, and no page numbers. This is a direct quote. All of these words were Corbin's. And that's why it's plagiarism. Here's example 2. Same thing, except now I've provided the author and the year. I've provided a citation of sorts. Is this plagiarism? Yes. Why? Because even though, yay for me, I gave a citation, there's still no quotation marks and there's still no page numbers. And remember, we need all 3 for it to be an appropriate citation. Okay. Here's example 3. Now I've provided quotation marks, the author, and the year. Is this plagiarism? Yes, it is. Why? Because again, yay me for providing the citation, and this time I've actually managed to provide quotation marks. So technically someone would know that this is a quote, and we're sort of okay in that regard, but we're still missing page numbers. And the page numbers are important because they will lead the reader to where the quotation can be found if they wanted to look it up on their own. So you do need all 3. Okay, what about this example 4? Again, same 2 sentences, and now I've said, or I've written, according to Corbin, quotes, culture is blah, 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 and I have a page number. So you probably guess that yes, this is okay. This is the correct way to properly cite one's source when it comes to quoting the source verbatim. So think of it as a checklist. So when you're wanting to provide a quote, ask yourself, did I include the author and the year? And in this case, yes. So great, we're good with that. Did we provide the quotation marks? Yes, so we're good with that. Are there page numbers listed where the quote can be found in the original source? Yes, so we're good. So we have not plagiarized. We have given the source the proper attribution. Okay. There is one slight exception to the whole needing quotation marks rule when it comes to copying verbatim. But still, note that the citation in terms of an author and a year and page numbers are still needed. So what does this look like, this exception? This is example 5. So here I have those same first 2 sentences, but now instead of just having one sentence as a quote, I just want to provide that entire paragraph. It might be the case that I don't feel like, it might be the case that I don't want to paraphrase because the way that Corbin sort of summed everything up is just exactly what I need for this part of my paper. So in that case, I would just provide the entire paragraph, and this is okay, the way that I have provided it. And the reason for that, I'll be explaining in a minute, but let's just go through that checklist to see what we have here. So do we have the author and the year? Yes. Do we have quotation marks? No. But let's put a little pin in that. Do we have page numbers? Yes. So let's go back to that pin there. Why don't we need quotation marks in this case? Well, in this case, the entire paragraph is one big quote. And the way that, according to AP style, we let the reader know this is that if we have a long quote that's more than 4 lines, we indent that paragraph or that quote, and we make sure to single space so that it's clear that it is all part of one big quote. So what would this look like in a paper? Well, here we would have the double the double spacing for the first couple sentences. And then where the quote is, you'll notice I've indented and single spaced. Okay, let's move on to type 2, copying and changing words. So here's the original sentence. Culture is not monolithic or static, but variable and dynamic. Just as a side note, I would caution against trying to paraphrase a single sentence. Some of you may be able to do it. There are people out there who can, but usually they're really good writers and experienced writers. So I would just suggest that if that's not you, go ahead and refrain from trying to paraphrase a sentence, because as you will see with these examples, it becomes a slippery slope into plagiarism. And these are sort of examples that I've seen personally in papers that are technically plagiarism. So here's an example. Culture is not one big thing or unchanging, but is varied and ever changing. Okay, this is a paraphrased version of that original sentence. Is it plagiarism? Yes. Why? Well, in this case, a thesaurus was badly misused. Okay, monolithic can also mean one big giant thing. Static means unchanging. Variable means that it's varied. And dynamic is ever changing. So this person, if this was on an actual paper, just basically used a thesaurus and changed out the words. Technically, that's plagiarism. Culture is not one big thing or unchanging, but is varied and ever changing. So this is the same as example 1, except now we provided a citation. Woohoo! An author and a year. Is this plagiarism? Yes, it's still plagiarism. Why? Well, even though we may have a citation, the sentence structure is essentially hers, okay? And a reader, on the other hand, would look at the sentence and think that it was written by the author just using the ideas of the source. But in this case, it's pretty much the same sentence, her words, just with the words switched out. So technically, it is plagiarism. Here's example 3. Culture is varied and ever changing. It is not one big thing or unchanging. Is this plagiarism? Yes. Why? Because all the person would have done is just switched out the clauses. There's a semicolon there in the middle, and they just turned them around. So just like with example 2, this is plagiarism. So to sum up, don't use a thesaurus and don't try to paraphrase a sentence unless you're really, really good at paraphrasing. Type 3 involves paraphrasing and citing. So here's the original again, and then this is my attempt at paraphrasing. Understanding what culture is and how it affects members requires consideration that A, individuals can experience the same culture differently, and B, cultures change over time in interaction with the environment. As I mentioned during orientation, it took me a really long time to come up with this paraphrased sentence. And that's because typically I don't paraphrase paragraphs. I'm just looking for ideas and concepts. And in fact, when I'm writing, I may have the sources next to me, but I don't look at them when I'm writing. It's a very slippery slope when you do that, because when you read someone else's writing, it's hard to come up with and be creative in your own writing. So I'll take notes and sort of put that all in my head, sit down and write, and then put the word cite next to sentences that I know the ideas came from somewhere else. So in any case, understanding what culture is, etc., those are my words, but her ideas. So how do I properly give attribution to the ideas that were from that original source, Corbin? Well, let's look at some examples and see how to do it. So here's that paraphrase by me. If I leave it just like this, because remember, these are my own words, is this plagiarism? Yes. Why? Because even though the words are my own, the ideas were not. So I need to cite my source in some way. Example number 2. Here I said, according to Corbin, 2002, and then there's the rest of my sentence. Is this plagiarism? No, this is okay. Why? Because I've given proper attribution. I have the citation in the form of the author and the year. I don't need quotes in this case because the sentence is a paraphrased version of her paragraph. So these are all my words. It's just the ideas that I'm giving credit to the source. Okay, example 3. Same thing as example 2, except I put the citation at the end. Is this plagiarism? No, this is okay. It doesn't matter where I put the author and the year, the beginning of the sentence or at the end, as long as it's there, then and the reader knows that even though these are my words, I got the idea from Corbin, then everything's okay. Not plagiarism. Okay, let's move on to type 4, paraphrasing, citing, and having multiple sentences. So this is similar to what we were just talking about, except instead of one sentence of paraphrasing, we have multiple. So let's say I take that original paraphrase and I split it up into 2 sentences. Corbin notes, 2002 notes that there are more differences within cultures and then between them. She suggests that understanding what culture is and how it affects, etc., is this plagiarism? Well, the question is about this period. That's where the question about plagiarism revolves. So in this case, we're okay. Why are we okay? Well, because 1, I have the citation here, and by starting the second sentence with she, it's clear to the reader that even though I don't have a citation for that second sentence, those ideas still belong to Corbin. My words, her ideas. Writing the sentence in this way allows me to not have to put a citation at the end of the sentence. And that's something that students sometimes can do when they get scared and just start putting citations after every single sentence. And you don't have to do that. And in fact, please don't do that because it makes it really hard for the reader. You can write your paragraphs in such a way that it's clear you're still writing about the same source, just like here. Okay, she is Corbin. Who else would it be? We don't need another source. We're good. Okay. How about this one? There are more differences within cultures than between them. Understanding, etc. And then I provide the author and the year. So I have this part of the citation. Is this plagiarism? Well, again, we have to look at this period here that separates our sentences. In this case, I provided attribution to Corbin for that second sentence in terms of the ideas. But what's going on with that first sentence? Well, plagiarism. Why? Well, because the way that this is, Written currently, it looks like that first sentence is my idea, and then the rest is Corbin's, when in fact both came from Corbin. Okay, so it is plagiarism. So at this point, you might be thinking, oh no, I need to cite everything. Like I said, every single sentence is going to need a citation. And no, like I said, please don't, that was not the intent of this presentation. Because there are certain things that don't require citations. Like I said, one of them being paragraphs where you've written sentences in a way that shows you're still referring to the same source. Other things that don't need to be cited are facts and common knowledge. For example, Mark Twain wrote the book Letters from the Earth. This is a fact. I don't need to cite someone who says this. It's just common knowledge. It's a fact. I don't need to cite that this is, if I wanted to use this sentence, I could use it. Because when we think about it, who would I cite to establish this as a fact, as I just said? Sometimes facts can be general, like this one, or they can be area or profession specific. For example, family preservation services were developed to prevent the unnecessary placement of children in foster care. This is common knowledge in the field of child welfare. Although, as I mentioned in the presentation at orientation, this is common knowledge now. Many, many years ago, when Family Pres first started, it wasn't common knowledge. And back then, if I wrote this sentence, I would have to cite a source like the law that established these services. Okay, so again, if it's common knowledge or a fact, if it's your own conclusions based on having read an article or like a study, you don't have to cite those. This presentation is for those cases where you're paraphrasing or quoting, and it can get a little bit tricky. So how do you not plagiarize? Of course, cite your sources properly with both in-text citations and a listing of references at the end of the paper. Now, of course, this presentation didn't go over the references listing, but I'm going to give you some websites at the end where you can find how to do that. That is much easier than in-text citations, so that's why I focused this presentation on that. Okay, use quotes when taking word for word, provide the author and the year, and include page numbers. But I want to caution everybody about using too many quotes, especially when you're writing academic papers. With some exceptions having to do with qualitative research mostly, you don't want too many quotes in a paper. My general sort of heuristic or shorthand is no more than 3 quotes per paper. Any more than that, and it kind of starts treading that line between whose voice is in this paper, whose ideas. When we as professors assign papers for you to write, the purpose is for you to show that you mastered the content in the course and that you're applying your critical thinking skills, taking information from various sources to come up with, one whole that represents your ideas about the ideas in those sources. We don't want to be reading quote after quote after quote because we're not grading those authors, we're grading you. We want to make sure that you understand the concepts in the course, all the content, and that you can apply it in the paper. The paper allows you to practice the skills that we're teaching you. Paraphrase properly and cite appropriately. And when you're paraphrasing content that has more than one sentence, your own words, use words and phrases like the authors also noted, he further suggests, the researcher went on to indicate. Phrases help connect the sentences so you don't have to cite each sentence over and over right after one another. Please use a thesaurus appropriately, not to find words to switch out. I think I covered that pretty well. And when in doubt, ask your professor, ask a librarian, look at this presentation, look at other how to avoid plagiarism websites. We're all here to help you. If you have a question, please don't hesitate to ask. There's no need for embarrassment or shame. This is not something that's super easy. So please, please, please ask. And as far as those links, nope, not those links. Before I get to the links, some reasons why not to plagiarize. And the first one being it's unethical. It goes against the NASW Code of Ethics that all social workers must abide by. And also, some psychological research has shown that dishonest behavior, such as cheating, actually alter a person's sense of right and wrong. So after cheating once, some students stop viewing the behavior as immoral. And you can see why this would be problematic for social work students who will one day become social workers. As I mentioned, the NASW Code of Ethics specifically talks about dishonesty. Also important, you're cheating yourself from the opportunity to learn and practice skills that are part of an assignment, the goal of which is to prepare you for social work practice. And here are those helpful links I mentioned earlier. The OWL Purdue Online Writing Lab has great resources on both in-text citations and also reference listings. They literally provide templates for the references listing, where you just pick from whatever type of source, whether it's a book, an edited book, an article, website, and they'll give you the template and you just plug in your information from your source. There are also similar tutorials to the presentation you just watched, one from Duke University and one from San Jose State. So go ahead and check those out. And then, of course, here are the sources of the images that I used in this presentation because I'm citing my sources. And that's it. I hope you found this useful, and thank you for watching.